server. Excellent. Our recording has begun. Welcome everybody. Session 2, we are going to do module number 2 today. And first of all, I wanted to ask all of you a mini update. Did you guys receive your books or not? Have you received it yet?
Not yet, no.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Have you received the recording of the last session?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Any questions, anybody?
Nothing from my end. Not
Okay.
yet.
Like I said, first 15 minutes of every session, I mean, other than the normal chit chat we do, because human connection is also important. The first 15 minutes are going to be devoted to any questions in case anybody brings up anything. It will begin today because the first set of case studies will come to you today. First set of additional readings will come to you today. Again, like I said, case studies and additional readings are all optional. They're not mandatory. Only mandatory things are the ones that will come from Gurvinder ji to you. Obviously, he will also send the other stuff, but then clearly whatever is mandatory, I will be screaming at the top of my lungs to make sure that you know that these are mandatory. The material that I give out for reading is generally for your own awareness and learning and relatability to your current job scenario. Okay, so today we are going to talk about learning disruptions and risks. I'm moving away from the question answer session because nobody has raised a question. I am going to present my screen. Apologies, guys. I'm doing multiple things today because Gurvinder ji isn't here. So I'm recording and I'm also admitting people who are popping in. So I'm going to now start sharing my screen. Share का option क्यों नहीं दिख रहा? बच्चे इसको बंद करते हैं. There I go. Okay, share. Now I can click the button. Let me know, guys, when you see the screen. Share. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. Perfect. And here I go into presentation mode. We are going to talk about module number 2. We will not break it into 2 pieces. Today we will do module number 2 together. So ये 2 sessions में नहीं होगा. Like I told you guys that some of the pieces, because the content is too much. Today's content is manageable. We are going to talk about learning disruptions and risks. And we are also, I'm not be unless and until I stop sharing and go back to the gallery view, I might not be able to see your chat or your hands up. So please unmute and interrupt me in case you have a question. Okay. So what do we mean by learning disruption? Topics that we'll cover today, a brief run through. Changing workplace and demographics. Very relevant topic with the way the whole paradigm, the industry is changing across the world, just not India, just not as a country, not as a continent, but internationally, the workforce and the demographics are changing. And how are we changing according to that? How are we accommodating people who are from Generation X? Obviously, the baby boomers, etc., are almost at the edge of retirement. In fact, that generation is almost eliminated. But the ones who are there, how are we accommodating them? How are we accommodating ourselves with the change? Because there are many people right now, and I don't know, I can talk about myself, who sometimes do feel overwhelmed with the amount of change happening with AI and all the things that are coming in. It's a mad race. We are used to a very different way of working. How do we bridge them? Digital HR, what does that really mean? Human resources has always been a very face-to-face, in-person kind of an interaction-based thing. Now we are increasing the headcount of every human resource person from a 40 to a 400 because we are saying, well, all admin tasks is taken care by AI. You have softwares. You don't have to issue letters. All you have to do is exit interviews, conflict resolution, performance conversations, brief admin. So tum zyada log handle kar sakte ho. Yeah. So when that happens, the impact is not only a single fold, but multifold in terms of the culture of the organization, in terms of how people perceive human resources. So what are the changes and how can digital human resource be an enabler for digital transformation of learning and development? Okay, I can give you an example. When I was talking to one of my friends, she's in private wealth management at Barclays. She said that we have never seen a human resource person in person. I said, wow, so how do you have your conversation? And she said, well, there are 4,000 people and there's one human resource person. Most of the questions are answered by the bot. In case you have to have a conversation, you have to book an appointment and then have a conversation, which is very different in the way that we have operated. So just an example for all of you. I've experienced that in Accenture myself and never met my human resource person. Never, ever met. Never had an HR induction. I got onboarded by the onboarding team and straight away sent to operations. They did all the induction. They did everything, whatever they had to tell me. Half of the time I was confused, but it happened. Eventually things clicked into place. Now the call that organizations take is it worth investing in the automation or investing in people for this whole 2-3 months of confusion that I spoke about? Does it even out the cost benefit? You guys, I will never call you people trainers. I always call people who come to this course as learning and development professionals, learning enablers, culture enablers. You might not have the tag of a senior leader, but what you do, the decisions you take, and the direction in which you take learning and development has a huge bearing on the culture of the company, on the employees that you're interacting with. And they can be employees, and in case you are not in a corporate job, the people whose life you touch and influence. It has a huge impact on it. So be aware that the cost factor or the technology factor or imitating somebody else might not be the best solution for the situation you are in. We'll talk more about it. And I do, like I said, I do a lot of coaching, mentoring, and a happiness coach. So I do give the philosophical angle along with the learning and development angle, which is more practical on the ground. These are more moral conversations as to what should be your moral compass, which direction in which should you be pointing when you take these decisions, and what is the impact, short term, long term. Then we are going to talk about disruptive needs, workforce of the future. This is relevant more than ever before. Right now, there used to be sustainability for Earth. Now we are talking about sustainability of workforce. Will our jobs even exist? What kind of jobs will be there in the future? What kind of a future can we even envision? Can we even imagine what it would be like? Can we predict? And how do we make sure that everybody doesn't get redundant? So as people who are as a part of the support function, and I club the support function as human resources, IT, finance, payroll, everybody is support function. They support the organizations or the entities wherever we work to succeed. So these people are the ones who carry the burden of disruption because they are enablers. So what will the future look like? Are their jobs sustainable? The people whose life we are impacting, are their jobs sustainable anymore? Are they relevant? So what skilling, upskilling, reskilling is required for people to be sustainable in their careers, in their lives, in their jobs? Because a larger impact of AI implementation, digital transformation implementation is requirement of people's reskilling, skilling of jobs. And in some situations, de-skilling as well. Some jobs, and we will talk about what does reskilling, upskilling, and de-skilling mean. They're separate things. We'll talk about each one of them. We'll try to give examples, but not in this chapter. We'll talk about it in the next chapter. We'll talk about learning, continuous development of learning, etc. Then we'll talk about risks of digital transformation. Then we'll talk about how we mitigate those risks. Then we will talk about briefly some of the case studies. I'll give you some case studies. I have some additional reading material that I will share, not discuss in the class. The discussion will be in the next class. And that's our topics that we will cover today. Okay, I am sure there are no questions right now. If there are, please hold on to them. When we go on to the topic, we'll talk about it. Now we are going to talk about generational workforce. This is going to be a very light and breezy session because most of the things are going to be fun to talk about and not something which is brand new that you have never experienced in the past. So what do we mean by generational workforce? A workforce is a combination of people from different generations, and hence we call it generational workforce. So who are these people who constitute a workforce? They are traditionalists, people who are born between 1925 to 1945. You do not have to write any of this down, guys. These are beautiful graphics, but then most of the material is there in your, not most, all of it is there in your textbook already. So just sit back and enjoy. The things that are not there, I will call out so you can take notes and you will also receive the presentation. So all the focus on listening and absorbing. That will be the best thing. So there's a lot of material on the screen. I'm going to go slow so that you can keep reading so that I don't have to parrot the whole content. Traditionalists are the people who are characterized by traits like being extremely dependable. You don't have to follow up with them. They will not run away saying pet mein dard hai. They will never do that. It's against their ethic. Their work ethic is so strong that even if they're unwell or there is a family crisis, they will show up. They're dependable. They're straightforward. They will call it what it is. They're polite, but they're also straightforward. They're extremely tactful and tremendously loyal. In that generation, you will hardly see people changing any jobs. What defined their traits and behaviors and how they interact with the world? Their life was shaped up by the Great Depression, the World War, and other things that affected their life at that point in time. And hence, they are the way they are. Okay, how are they motivated? They're motivated by respect, recognition, and long-term value to the company. They wear it as a badge. Being there in an organization for a long period of time is just not a number. There's much more emotional value associated with it. What is their communication style? Personal touch, handwritten notes, not emails. These are the older, the dadajis and the nanajis. They're too very old. And what is their worldview? Their worldview about the world, how they interpret the world, is obedience over individualism. In case its top-down approach works best with them. You give them an instruction, they won't question it. They will just run with it. Age equals seniority. They believe that since I'm older to you, I know better than you. It may not be right or wrong. We're just talking about what the facts are. Okay? And then showing and making sure that you're following the hierarchy, showing the hierarchy to you and following the hierarchy. I am 3 steps above than you, so you will listen to me. So, in case you are an employer, especially, and this is more for people who are from the human resource background, or when you are trying to run an initiative in the organization, you should be taking care of the fact that they require opportunities to contribute and they need the sense of stability in our organization. Okay. Like I said in the beginning of the class today, there are very few people left from this generation now. So they are basically getting extinct. They are passing their age gap. Most of them are on the verge of retirement or already have retired. Then the next generation is the baby boomers, 1946 to 64. They're optimistic, they're competitive, they're workaholic, and they're team-oriented. How did they become like this? They are shaped by the Vietnam War, civil rights movement, Watergate, and these graphics that I've taken are from an international portal, and that's why there are many things which are not necessarily India-centric, but our lives were also touched by it, and you can also relate to that and how the thought process worked in that situation. How are they shaped? They're shaped by the Vietnam War, civil rights movement, Watergate. They're motivated by company loyalty, teamwork, and duty, sense of duty. Their communication style, in most of the cases, phone calls, they prefer face-to-face, but they're quite open to ideas about becoming more relevant and staying relevant. They are not as rigid as the traditionalists. The communication style comprises of a mixture of various kinds of modes, even though they veer more towards face-to-face and interaction, human interaction, they always prefer that. What should the employers do? The employers should provide them goals, definite deadlines, and also allow them the opportunity to mentor people, provide coaching, provide feedback. They do great with that. Then there's the Generation X. This generation is right now quite prevalent, I would say. The middle to senior management is influenced by Generation X in most organizations. They're flexible, they're informal, they're skeptical, and they're independent. So all the hard work that was done by the traditionalists and the baby boomers to make sure that their children are well taken care of, those are the children, they are the outcomes. So the Generation X is the one who are reaping the benefits of all the hard work done by traditionalists and the baby boomers. Their experience has been shaped by the AIDS epidemic, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the other political and geographical events that have taken place, the dot-com boom. Many of the Generation X, including myself, are have experienced the Twin Towers, they have experienced the software bubble bursting, and how you approach your job, how flexible you become in terms of, okay, if not this industry, some other industry. Okay, if not this job, something else. The instinct to survive, the instinct to thrive is much higher in Generation X because they've seen a lot of change. I'm not saying that any kind of change experienced by previous generations or lesser generations are less detrimental. But in this situation, the reason for people to be extremely flexible and informal has been because of the rapid change experienced by Generation X. Okay, how are they motivated? They're motivated by diversity. They talk about work-life balance, which never existed in previous generations. The personal professional balance is very important for them. Company interests, they try to align themselves to it so that they are sustainable, and they just not sustain, they also thrive in the sustenance. The communication style is pretty diverse. They are very efficient, so they can do calls, they can do emails, they can do face-to-face, they're pretty much flexible. In short, if you had to take away one word about this generation, it would be flexible. Okay. What is the work view? Their work view largely is, these are the people who talk largely about diversity. They recognize the social issues because the traditionalists and baby boomers were trying to fix the foundation, which is the salt and the carbohydrates. These are the people who bring in the additional condiments that are required to bring in cultural changes in society, because that is where their life placement has been. What do the employers do to keep them motivated? Give them point-to-point feedback, okay? Do not delay feedback. Tell them on the face what it is. Allow their flexibility to take over in terms of course correction in case they're not doing well. They appreciate it. Also, providing them flexible work arrangements. Work from home isn't that a crazy thing for them, even though after pandemic, all of these traits have changed. But then if you look at it on a ground zero level, flexibility is not a very hot thing for them. They're very flexible, but their work from home is not a very hot thing for them. They're okay going to work. They're okay being flexible in their work environment, but they do demand opportunities for personal development, and they do not shy away from doing the hard work. Now we come with the most, what should I say, talked about and not controversial. I think the next generation is the most controversial right now. The millennials, we still know what they are. Okay. They are competent. They are open-minded. They look at social issues with a very different lens. They were protected while they were growing up. They were generally products of smaller families, not joint families. So they are very achievement-oriented. So the competitive and achievement-oriented can come across in society as being selfish. But having said that, it's a judgment. If you look at millennials, the biggest thing, the biggest behavior that you will see with them is not being extremely social. They are most of the time shaped by the internet, online resources. Their mental frame has been impacted by 9/11. And of course, there are other aspects of millennials that we are not able to relate to from other generations. For example, not being able to make eye contact, not being able to express themselves eloquently in public, but when they write, when they work, their work is superior. Why? Because the way they learn and they execute is very different. Also, they do not run away from taking responsibility, or they do not run away from trying something new. Because they have so many resources at the tip of their fingers, they know how to abuse, if not use, abuse technology. They know how to use it in their benefit. What is the communication style? Texts, IMs. Very informal way of communicating. It's the idea of having to wear a tie, go to work, any formal interaction really scares them. And that is where they run away from that. Okay. Their worldview is challenge, growth, give me something new. The idea of instant gratification is very prevalent in millennials and the generations later. They are not the ones who would wait for a pack of chips for 1 month. They want it right now. So there is lack of patience. And you would observe that also. Okay. They manage by results. So they are okay with the idea if somebody comes and says, well, if you deliver good, otherwise, and they are also okay. They do not value loyalty as much. For them, what is important is to be able to get regular basis feedback. And if it doesn't work, they're not scared to call it quits. They are ready to try something different, or as the language goes, they're okay to move on. The emotional burden is lesser. So to provide them and manage them, you have to give them immediate feedback. You have to give them point-to-point assignments with clear instructions. Yeah, that's millennials for you. And then the last one, which is right now the lower generation, what should I say, the junior group of people whom we are interacting with. Just a minute, I need to switch this off. Apologies, this WhatsApp message clicks keep coming. Okay, sorry. Can you guys still see my screen? No, you can't. Let me go and share again. Sorry, guys, I was getting distracted. Can you see my screen back again?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
David? Yeah, good.
Yes.
Sorry. So the Generation Z is the Generation Z. They call it Z. It's more of a US term. They are the boots on the ground, as I like to call it. They are the primary workforce. These are the people whom we hire. These are the people whose learning plans you will need to make. These are the people who are coming into the mid to senior, not senior, I would say mid management levels, which primarily means that they are the ones who are going to make a large impact of how the culture is reflected in the organization. The people at the top can sit and scream and yell saying that this is what we will do, this is what we will not do. That these are the people who are really executing and putting the culture in touch, feel, and action. So what are their thoughts? Since they have experienced the cushion of the Generation X, that is generally their grandparents, they have had parents who have tried to provide them the best of comfort. And this is largely Asia centric, India centric, because we are talking about a pretty much Indian group of people. Generation Z has a worldview. They had the time. They had the time, they had the opportunity to look at the world because of the internet and other things. Others were too busy trying to build a home, trying to build a sustainable living, trying to save money, trying to buy a house, buy a car. They were struggling with that. But this generation had the privilege of getting all these things as a part of their growing up. So they have a worldview. They have a point of view about things. They're entrepreneurial. They are being encouraged to bring in entrepreneurial thought process, which goes with the con that they do not want to work for people. Their freedom is too important for them, which also causes them to hop jobs much faster without regret. And they would have very relevant, very convincing reasons as to why they moved on. So they are very progressive and they're not very focused. Instant gratification, in case of millennials, if it was 6 out of 10, for Generation Z, it's 11 out of 10. They want it now. They want appreciation now. They want the money now. They want the success now. So if it's not happening, they're upset. So this is the reason why there is extra effort required by organizations, human resource professionals to come up with innovative ways of engaging them. Their brain is full of information. They're high potential people. But how to utilize them? This whole idea about being restless, this idea about being, oh, I can do something better. Oh, let me move on to something new. How do you harness that? How do you make it productive? How do you make it something that works largely for your benefit? So that becomes a challenge. So what do you give them? You give them all kinds of variety of engagements. You don't engage them in one project. You give them huge amount of flexibility. You allow them to do things on the side. You do not give them directions. Do not micromanage them. They will get suffocated. They will run away. So you'll have to find innovative ways of making sure that you're giving them the freedom, but also monitoring them, supervising them. Because otherwise, the results can be something absolutely different than what you asked for. Their communication style, don't talk to us, please. Just let us be. They don't want to talk to you. So the only way they will not pick up your call. They will let it go to voicemail. They might respond to your text, but what they will do is that in case you are able to motivate them really well, they will ensure that they deliver results. They need their personal space and privacy more than anybody else. So how you engage with them socially, it's a challenge everybody's facing. Nobody's been able to crack the code. But as an employer, what you have to do is give them a variety of benefits. Show them that they are adding value on a regular basis, more frequently that you have to do with other generations, and also supervise them in a way that they are not being micromanaged, but macro manage them. Okay. So I've spoken at a very long time without taking a break. I'm going to show you the next slide and then take a pause. So we are talking about this slide, which can pretty much save you the trouble of going through like 11, not 11 pages, 5, 8, 10, 9 pages of content. At one look, if you just have to remember, how do you manage the 5 generations? This is a kind of a summary. Believe in, so the number one, a small recap, believe in hierarchical management style, strong work ethic, loyal to the company, slow to adapt to new technology. Baby boomers, reserved in communication style, value traditional in-person interactions in learning, and top qualities for the manager, which are ethical, fair, and consistent. So if you have somebody from this generation, these are the traits you can find with your eyes closed. Generation X, view change as a vehicle for opportunity, embrace a hands-off management policy, and more democratic as leaders, and entrepreneurial spirit and result-oriented. That's Generation X. But they do not throw caution to the wind. And that is why they also make great leader material. Millennials looking to be coached, mentored, prefer collaborative and technology-centric training, align with the company values. And if they don't believe in the company value, they work there. Simple. They will refuse a great fat package. Generation Z, accustomed to change and expects it in the workplace. Giving them a pink slip is easier. Value in-person interactions, even though you will realize that they are not responding to texts, etc. If you're able to catch hold of them and have a conversation with them, because they're not having it on a regular basis, they really value it because they value their own time. That means when you're talking to them, they value yours as well. Looking for feedback on a frequent, ongoing basis more than anybody else. Okay, so that's the 5 generations we spoke about. Before I jump into the issues that can arise from generational gap, I'm going to take a pause and allow people to ask any questions, share any feedback or comment. We are doing good on time, so I'm going to stop the share. So any comments, thoughts, any questions?
Yeah, I have one question. Yeah. So, yeah, starting from the earlier than starting from those who born in 1940s or there, till the current year, 2022 to 20 who are in changes actually. So the is the shift in so is there any external factors that comes into the play for the workforce shift actually, starting from
There
the
are a lot of, thanks for your question. There are a lot of factors that come into play when it talks about the shift of the generations and how they behave, how they
means
interact, how they
external
learn.
factors like changes in the economy because earlier there
Of
were
course,
more.
of course, of course. So when you see the sections that are there in the presentation, we talk about how their behaviors are shaped by it. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the earlier times, the people who have seen the World War, who have seen the partition, who have seen the impact of what socio-economic changes are created because of the political decisions, their way of working, their way of trying to make sure that they're holding on to property, making sure that they are gathering enough for their children. That's a very different kind of a thought process from somebody who's a Generation Z who's like, okay, house is a normal thing. It's supposed to be there. It's entitlement. So that definitely makes a huge difference. And it shapes the way, not only it doesn't only shape the way of people, it also shapes the way how society operates. And I don't know how much you guys remember from your childhood, how your parents behaved and how they interacted with society and how they did things is very different than the way we do it. We do Blinkit, we do Zomato. Did they ever do something like that? No, never, never, ever. For them, it would be a sin. Eating out for more than once a month would be a sin. Food has to be cooked at home. Children have to go to work every day. I mean, all of those things are very different and foreign as compared to what we do today.
Yeah,
So there
another
is a
thing I
huge,
want to
huge influence.
add is that for the earlier generation, there were lots of government jobs or public sector,
Yeah,
so their working style was really different, and now it has entirely changed. Actually,
changed.
their government jobs are now reducing actually. So there are lots of temporary jobs are now they are so like that.
Yes. And also, I won't say that I will make correction to that statement. Government jobs are not reducing. There are, in fact, I was talking to one of my friends. I'm educated from St. Stephen. So one of my friend is a influential Indian administrative service professional. So he was telling me that government jobs are in an all-time low of being. There are so many vacant positions that they are not able to find the people to fill it. Even there are thousands and thousands of people applying, but they're not able to fill the positions because the right kind of talent is not available. Either they're not applying or they're not interested. So there are a lot of positions which are open. So actually, the government is struggling to make sure that they have to make their jobs attractive enough. What has changed is earlier, the typical career routes used to be very fixed: bank PO, engineering, medical, IAS, IFS. All of those were very limited thought process, and that is what the parents would also funnel their children into. But now, with all of these different kind of opportunities opening up and possibilities of making revenue streams from those interests has increased so much that people are no longer taking that as the only source of earning income, which opportunities were not there earlier. Yes, Shuli, go ahead.
Yeah. No, just to add on to what you have talked about, the various, types of generations and everything. So my father belongs to somewhere like a traditionalist, and we belong to in that 1980 wala generation.
Hmm.
So today, like I was just speaking with my father on something, and like as you rightly said, they believe in loyalty. So my father has been working in the same organization where he retired for nearly 26 years.
Yeah, very
That is
normal.
not something we can't even expect a
No.
person today. And when I speak with him and they see that people are changing their jobs in 1 year, 2 year, he's like, I don't know what is happening. How can you easily change the job? आपको adjust होने में ही 6 महीना चला जाता है. And by the time you start performing, you're already thinking about leaving and going to
Yeah,
another organization.
yeah.
So he cannot fathom that, thought process of people right now.
Yeah, and also it's taken as a blemish. If you look at how recruiters
Yes.
hire nowadays, it is taken as a blemish if you stay in an organization for a very long time. I gave General Electric 11 and a half years of my life. Okay. I only know how much struggle I went through to find a different job, because most of the people, recruiters, will look at me and say that you've been in one organization for way too long, which means that you will not be able to adjust into another organization easily. And I'm like, really? Isn't that supposed to be a great thing that I've been in one organization for a lot of time? It talks to my stability, it talks to my loyalty, but it doesn't. So, unfortunately, all these things that are happening, the traditionalists and the baby boomers are unable to relate to it because it's so
Yes.
foreign to them.
I mean, that
That
could
is
be
not
one of
how
the
the world
reasons.
operates.
Yeah, that could be one of the reasons the government, as you were saying, that the
Hmm.
government organizations are not able to get people or the kind of people that they want. That could be one of the reasons, because today,
Yeah,
but the thought process of government is, once you join the job, you're there till you retire. But
exactly.
that's not how people today think. They are like, they
Yes.
want to see if look, it's a mutual respectable or a mutual giving relation. If it's not, they just walk off.
And also, have you noticed how much of value is now started being associated? I'm not saying it wasn't there earlier, but now the value of money is higher than ever it was.
Yes, yes.
So earlier generations were very okay having 2 square meals or 3 square meals in a day
Hmm.
and moving on beyond that. And they just educate our children. When we will be old, we will retire, we are okay.
Huh.
But now, the because of the worldview, people also
Correct.
want to expand more. They're asking for more. They
Yes,
want a bigger
yes.
car. They want a bigger house. The aspirations and the ambitions of
The
people
biggest thing
work
which
out
I'm
with them.
seeing is people want to travel. Even if you don't have your house and your car, they're okay to stay in a rented home, but they want to travel. They want to see the world, because you can बोलते हैं ना, कुएं का मेंढक बन के नहीं रहना है. They want to see
Yes,
the world which will change their views. And that is where
yes,
I believe that the biggest investment is happening right now.
exactly. Himanshu, go ahead. You had a question?
Yeah, ma'am. So this question is related to Gen Z. How to engage this as Gen Z in the training program? Recently, one incident happened.
Yeah.
There was a one colleague. Uh, she had some health issues, so she replaced with another trainer in engineering college. And that
Hmm.
trainer come and he came for nearly 5 days
Hmm.
as a replacement. But in one day he took the training, and then next day he went to his home and he said, "I can't handle this generation of the students." And then the person, my colleague with the health problems, he had to come back and again take the training. So question is how to deal with this generation Z in the training program. Any tips?
I will give you a lot of tips because the next few slides will definitely talk about how to engage these people. There isn't really one solution to it. We need to find out, first of all, what overwhelmed our colleague whom you spoke about. What was overwhelming for him? Were they asking too many questions? Were they not talking at all? For example, people from my generation will find it extremely, extremely, extremely rude that you do not put on your camera when you're talking to somebody. There are companies where I've worked in the past and they've taken huge offense to it. In fact, it was even made mandatory that you have to be able to see the person to be able to talk. Imagine how difficult it is to talk to a blank screen for hours. So trainers can get overwhelmed by different things, but millennials don't show them. They clearly see um, they clearly see that as a invasion of personal space or privacy or whatever. I'm okay showing up on a camera to talk to somebody because I have oil in my hair and I'm not looking great. I'm absolutely fine. But that generation doesn't want to be present and aware of those kind of, what should I say, expectation. Even the interaction is less. You have to specifically go and check. Even in an in-person session, when you are standing in front of them, being able to engage with them, talk to them, get responses from them. They're constantly on their phones. They're distracted. They're doodling. They're not making eye contact. It can be very, very overwhelming for a trainer to be able to handle that. So there can be different reasons why this gentleman had gone ahead and said that I can't handle this. It can be because they were asking too many questions or they were just giving him the cold shoulder. Whatever. He's saying whatever he has to say. There have been some of the ISTD sessions where I've talked to people without people talking to me even once. When I would say yes, no, no, maybe, guys, did you hear it? Nobody would respond. And I would think that I'm totally failing. But at the end, people would write these long WhatsApp messages that your classes were the best and it really helped us. Told anything in the classroom, never asked any questions, never did anything. So it can become overwhelming. But is there a one solution? There isn't. But then we will look at some ways how to engage with them. And we can have some case studies, etc. Also talk about how you engage with them, how you interact with them, how you make mandatory touch points. We'll talk about learning curve. We'll talk about social engagement. We will go ahead and by the end of the session, if we still haven't answered, we can revisit your question. Is that okay, Himanshu?
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you.
There is somebody's hand is up. The name shows MB, so I don't really know what your name is, but then you're welcome to ask your question. You are muted. Yeah, go ahead. नहीं सुनाई दे रहा.
Michael, his
Yeah.
name is Michael Bird actually,
Okay.
but I think this happened the last Sunday also. Michael, आपका आवाज नहीं सुनाई दे रहा है. If you can pose in your question then.
हाँ, maybe you can put it in the chat. मैं देखती हूँ. Chat में दिख रहा है क्या कुछ? Let me see. Thank you, Garima. Yes, attrition is an issue with Generation Z. उनकी attention span कम है ना? मन नहीं किया, मजा नहीं आया, moved on. But then how do you handle that? Because we cannot go into a vicious cycle of hiring, firing, hiring, firing, hiring people leaving, hiring people leaving. So we will see what we can do about it. Like I said, there isn't a fixed solution. One shape fits all. It doesn't happen that way, but we will see where we can reach. Debayan, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is a more like the inflation that we are facing nowadays is a major reason why the people are changing the jobs. I mean, the stability is a concern, and people are looking for the security and
Yeah,
the kind of life they want. In
yeah,
that case, the inflation is actually a bigger concern for the organizations, and also if we talk about the longevity of a particular employee, we must look for the company culture. Now,
Mm.
right now, what I am experiencing, and most of the people are experiencing, like HR and L&D is more most of the time is driven by the sales team. Earlier, it was like HR and L&D were the backbone of the organizations, where they used to navigate everything, where the CEOs used to work with them in coordination with the sales team. Sales team used to have the manpower as per the requirement. Now, the
Mm.
quality manpower used to be hired at that time when the
Mm.
HR intervention much more higher. But right now, what
Mm.
we are seeing that like CBO is the concerned person ahead of the CHRO. So whereas CHRO is instructed by the CBO, and there the conflicts happens. So the culture which we want to inherit in this kind of generation is a major concern, and the choices of the consumer and the sales force and the effect of the sales is actually a concern for the stability for the employees. The culture is a bigger concern in this case. So
It's a very relevant question that you're bringing in. If you look at the 6 pillars we talked about in the first class, culture is eventually what drives how people stay in the organization, how long they stay, how they interact, how they work. It is also defined by the top management, your champions, as to how people would be interacting and learning from each other. Now, the idea of the business driving the human resource agenda um, is part of the change that is happening, in which human resources is moving out from being a siloed function or somebody who had either no power or had a lot of power. In different
mm,
organizations, they had a lot of power. एचआर ने बोल दिया वही होगा बस ठीक है डर के रहो और है फुद्दू है बस लेटर्स इशू करते हैं वी हैड टू काइंड्स always, right? Now what's happening is human resources is facing the challenge that if you do not shape up, you will be shipped out because you are no longer adding value. जो लेटर इशू करते थे उनका काम तो हो गया काम तमाम टेक्नोलॉजी आ गई you don't need it. And then there were ones who are holding power. They are becoming irrelevant now because they are not matching up with the business agenda. Business needs के opposite direction में काम करोगे तो एक गाड़ी इधर खींच रहे एक गाड़ी इधर खींच रहे गाड़ी कहीं नहीं जा रहा. So what is happening now is, and this is a, and I'm thank you for the question. We will talk more about it in the later chapters, but still, when you realize that human resource is no longer a separate function, it has become a business enabler.
mm,
So when you say that the CBO or the CEO, the business is now driving the HR agenda, it's good because it keeps it relevant. But now, if it is being driven, when I say it's driving the human resource agenda, does it mean it's trying to suck the budget or control what happens and what doesn't happen? That is where conflict arises. So, if
mm,
it is driving the human resource agenda in line with the business needs to make sure that everybody sustains and thrives, then it's great. It's moving the car in the same direction. But if it is trying to stunt or suffocate the human resource agenda, saying that कोई जरूरत नहीं engagement की बंद कर दो अरे ये बंद कर दो वो बंद कर दो cost cutting कर दो, then it is pushing the car in the opposite direction. It is like saying lip service that I want culture, I want culture, I want culture, but your actions do not speak in line of that.
mm.
So who makes a change there? Learning enablers can make a change there. But your concern is relevant because not always they are empowered or not always they are able to find the opening to be able to put those changes forward. And it might not be the organization's vision. So there are two things you can do in that situation. Convince with a real life example how it will benefit the organization. Find your champions, work the quote unquote politics, organizational politics to be able to push your agenda, or move on. Try, doesn't happen, move on. If it doesn't match. There are multiple organizations, smaller organizations, typical patriarchal organizations that resist change. Resist change more than they should. So there are very ambitious leaders who go there who try to introduce change. It doesn't happen. But now it is their choice, that leader's choice. Do I want to, quote unquote, spend time here trying to put my head on the wall multiple number of times in a day, um, and observing it for, let us say, 1 year or 2 year, nothing is changing, then you move on, or else you identify where are the openings. It might not be everywhere. And I gave this example when we spoke about a learning management tool implementation. Most of the people will listen to the cost and say, no, we can't spend so much money. But where are the openings? Can you pitch a smaller solution, which won't cost them 50 lakhs? Can you pitch a 2 lakh solution? Can you pitch a 3 lakh solution? Can you make it a proof of concept and say, now are you willing to invest a little more? Can you make incremental changes? So that is where you are banging your head on the wall and you're finding an opening. And this goes to the previous, somebody commented, I'm sorry, I forgot the name, that you keep on trying to bring in change and nothing happens and people move away in 1 or 2 years. That happens because they are not patient enough to see where the openings are. If you are able to find some openings, then it is worth for staying a longer period of time and using those openings to your benefit. But if you're banging your head on the wall and an opening is not showing up, it's time to move on. And in that situation, I appreciate millennials and the Generation Z. They are able to identify it. Now, the problem is that because they are less patient, they don't give it time. According to me, an employment tenure minimum should be 2 hours. 2 years minimum. It's minimum because by 2 years, you really generally get to know the culture of the organization and you are comfortable. After that, if things are not working with you, you're not able to align, you're not able to find your common partners, then either you are not for the job, number one. Number two, you are not competent enough, you're in the wrong job. And number three, the company doesn't need you. And you have to be honest about it. And then you move on. Does it help?
The organization that where I actually work, we are having around 10,000 plus employees, so pan India basis. So
Yeah.
here everything is driven by the sales team.
Yeah.
So we are in the microfinance industry, so this is what we are actually facing right now.
This is common in the finance industry. I've noticed this. Finance industry, I think, resists the change maximum amount of time, not in terms of technology, etc., but in terms of investment in people. Because we are a country where there are a lot, it is an employer's market, not an employee's market. We are too many. And with all these changes that are happening in the technology, and ये नहीं करेगा कोई और करेगा कोई बात नहीं. So there is this always availability of resources. But what these organizations do not understand, which maybe a Moody's understands, or maybe a Barclays understands, or maybe the larger organizations understand that this is a temporary phase. At one point in time, because you have not innovated as everybody else, you will slump. It will happen, if not now, in 5 years. But the organizations which have systematically invested in their people and also invested in the technology solutions, they will soar at that point in time. And that is why Google doesn't stay 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps ahead of its competitors. First of all, they don't have any competitors. And second, they stay ahead of other organizations because they think fast. When I was working in Google Learning and Development, 99% was supposed to be a failure. Do you know that? Facebook would call me and say 99.3% is a bad mark. Where did we lose the 0.7%? Because they take this seriously, starting from learning and development, starting from training, starting from human resources. They believe in people so much that for them, a 99.3 is a failure, a 99 is a failure. For them, 105, 110 achievement is what they require. And it's not about sandbagging targets. It's about investing in people, investing in technology, which will truly push the organization in a positive direction. But not all organizations will have the vision. So, Devayan, don't beat yourself up. Many organizations, the leaders are unable to see it till the time you give them an example of a competitor or of how horrible the future can look like. You have to convince them through examples. Most of the time, they will not listen to you from an internet study, or even if you quote them a fantastic example like a Google and Facebook, they will say, "Hum hai hi nahi Google, humne banna hi nahi." So they will not listen to those examples. What they will listen to is a case that you are able to make, which is irrelevant for them. For them to even pick, it is like a buffet. Okay, you will pick up the item only if it's attractive enough. If you don't relate to it, no matter how good or how tasty the item is, you won't try it in your buffet. Yeah. So one of the things also, and thank you for that comment, Anirban. It is true that they prefer highly innovative Generation Zs than millennials for junior positions because millennials may face redundancy by potentially tech-concerned Gen Zs. It is yes and no to that response, Anirban, because redundancy is going to happen to everybody. With how the technological disruption is happening, and you will notice that more and more around you, that the redundancies will happen in all generations. Preferring one generation over another is not really something that the employers will look at, especially for hiring. For hiring, you need to have, and we'll talk about risks that arise due to generational disruptions. We are perfectly placed for this conversation. That if you have too much of similar kind of a generation, there are other risks that you can run into in terms of your agenda being implemented in the organization. Okay, so I'm going to take you back to the risks and also talk about the mitigations that we can have. Here you go. Let me know when you see my screen. Can you see my screen, guys?
Yeah.
Yes, no, maybe.
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
So issues that can arise due to generational gaps. Let's take the bull by the horns. First of all, interpersonal issues. Everybody is aware of it. The graphic says it all. You don't understand, you are stupid, you are old, you don't know it, I know it better. And the other person responds saying, I have experience, I've survived this. You know nothing, you're too young. So this is interpersonal issues, very common. Lack of mutual understanding, of course. And then there is friction due to working styles. The other person is writing an email. You are saying, email क्यों लिख रहा है यार? सीधा phone कर दे. That time is correct. So that will happen because they're different kind of working style. Then there is the idea of communication gap, which is similar to my example that I've given you, that people will write an email, send a report, and go home. The other person is like, you should be sending it to me on WhatsApp. The other person, no, it's confidential information. I shouldn't be sending it on WhatsApp. No, send it to me on WhatsApp. I'm on my phone. Why are you on your phone? Why are you not at work? All of these things will happen because an X or a Y or a Z is pretty comfortable looking at a meeting while on the phone while driving. Then the other person is, why are you not in office? All of this will happen. It is natural. It always happens, and it's happening even right now. So an interesting graphic which I found, and I put it out here, let me know if this helps to all of you, is communication styles for different generations. Look from left to right. Look at that. The first one, maturists. They are also called traditionalists, are also called maturists. Look at that. They prefer letters, etc. And they prefer to talk to you face to face. Then there is, one second, I'm sorry. Somebody is trying to get in the class. Okay. Yeah. And then there is the next generation, which we are saying the baby boomers. They prefer all kinds of communication modes. They're flexible. When you move on to generation X, they prefer emails. They prefer text messages. And then when you go to generation Y, their preferred style of interaction is more through Wi-Fi, through their phone, and they communicate through text messages and social media, especially the generation Y. And then you look at generation Y is also called millennials, by the way. And generation Z, हैंडहेल्ड डिवाइसेस, बैठना ही नहीं जी लैपटॉप पे, सब कुछ फोन पे करना है, सब कुछ यूट्यूब का शॉर्ट डालना है, रील डालना है, सब कुछ फोन पे करना है, जिंदगी जीना ही फोन पे. Okay, and they would prefer talking to you on FaceTime, or they will prefer talking to you WhatsApp. They will do video calls, even though I slightly disagree. It is very difficult to see their faces. I have done classes, I coach teenagers, I do career counseling. The maximum number of suicidal cases that come to me, because I do also suicide and the depression coaching, maximum of them are like Y and Z. And even in Y and Z, the percentage is 80% Z. They have problem in social interaction and they become suicidal for no reason at all. I'm not making fun. I'm just talking about the society fabric that we are dealing with right now. It is scary to say the least, and those of your parents will relate to it. It's very, very difficult to know what's going inside their head. They don't want to get on a video call also. मेरे से बात ही मत करो. That is what their whole idea is for Generation Z. Okay?
Even
So
they don't
these are the
want to
issues.
attend weddings and
Nothing.
parties and
जाने तुझे.
family functions.
जाने कुछ करना ही नहीं कुछ. नहीं कुछ. इन्वॉल्व ही नहीं होना. कोई रिलेटिव से नहीं मिलना. कोई बुक, मतलब बुक भी पढ़ना है तो मेरी अपनी मर्जी की पढ़ना है. फर्स्ट चैप्टर सुनना है. फर्स्ट चैप्टर का 15 मिनट सुनते ही बेकार किताब है. क्विक टू कंक्लूजन, इंस्टेंट ग्रेटिफिकेशन. मैंने काम किया, मुझे इमीडिएटली रिवॉर्ड मिलना चाहिए, अवार्ड मिलना चाहिए. Yes, exactly correct, Shivli. They love to live in isolation because unfortunately the joy and the gift of social interaction is directly weaved into the society and the culture. These children are products of nuclear families, products of both parents working, products of parent guilt tripping and giving them money and gifts. And what do they ask for? So they don't have to struggle, they don't have to beg, they don't have to please, they don't have to appease, they don't have to do anything to be able to get something. All they have to do is throw a long face. And then their instant gratification happens. Now it talks to largely about the societal fabric, and that's a bigger conversation. It's a more of philosophical conversation about how we are shaping the society and how where people are learning information from. Earlier, people would learn from each other. Social interaction must to know कैसे करना है, क्या करना है, यहाँ पे किसको पूछें, किसी को तो पूछें, किसी से तो बात करें. Now you don't need गूगल में जाओ, कुछ भी टाइप करो, कोरा में जाओ, रेडिट में जाओ, इस वाले फोरम में जाओ, इंस्टाग्राम में जाओ, कहीं पे भी कुछ भी इंफॉर्मेशन मिल जाता है. You don't have to talk to anybody. You can pretty much stay alone. And that is the reason where people are getting wrong information largely. And it's not always necessary that the information that you get online is accurate information. I can cite 10 examples where I've gotten wrong information from it. It's always helped to talk to somebody who has gone through the situation themselves to handle it, but then avoid karo na baat karna. Kisi ki galti nahi hai. This is not about making somebody wrong, but it is the truth. That is how this generation is. And we have this on our hands, and they are the ones who are going to create the future. So how do you harness them, and how do you use risk mitigation to make sure you bridge the gap? So let's bridge the gap. How do we do it? Number one, the big thing is your recruitment strategy. Now we are going to talk hardcore learning and development. Your recruitment strategy has to be correct. What is your recruitment strategy? What kind of jobs you need what generations to do? तो जो लोगों से बात ही नहीं करना चाहते, जो आइसोलेशन में रहना चाहते हैं, वहां पे आप जनरेशन जेड के लोग हायर करेंगे ना. आप हायर करेंगे उन जॉब्स के लिए. यू विल हायर somebody who is from X. You will put the Y and Z to learn from them. They have to be mentored, they have to be coached, they have to be taught how things are done. And if they like it, it's okay. If they're not, then they are going to do different jobs which are at the back end. Avoid age-based assumptions. While we are talking about generalizing people, saying that X ऐसे होते हैं, Y ऐसे होते हैं, Z ऐसे होते हैं, ऐसा हमेशा नहीं है. There are also some Z whom I know who are extremely adaptable and very social. So avoid age-based assumptions or stereotyping, because when you stereotype, you let go or you kind of shut out talents. Now, one of the stereotyping examples is using the applicant tracking system. I don't know how many of you know about it. Most of you have applied for jobs, you know ATS. ATS क्या करता है? वो एक कुछ filters उठाता है. उस filters के basis पे it just shuts out some resume saying that ये तो हमारा fit ही नहीं होगा. Some of the times you actually are letting go of useful, very, very relevant talent just because the software is not able to track, and the software is putting too many conditions to eliminate the talent. So a good idea can be to avoid age-based assumptions when you're setting your filters. Even if your pool becomes a little more, even if you have to parse through a few more resumes, even if you have to look at a few more extra learning strategies, be willing to do that to avoid any age-based assumptions or stereotyping. For example, लड़कियों को इन jobs पे रखना ही नहीं चाहिए. Women are a problem. People from tier 2 cities cannot speak good English. These are typical stereotyping and typical assumptions. Then customize approach for them. So every group of every team that's created, you have to have an ideal balance. And on that balance, you have to find out what are the groups of employees for whom you have to have a customized approach, both in case of learning, also in terms of functioning in day to day. When we talk about learning, especially in a classroom, when you can always pick up your audience. It is a matter of luxury if you can pick up your audience, and if you can do an analysis of what is the group of people who are going to attend the training or the learning strategy and whom you have to design your strategy for. So in different scenarios, customization can mean different things. One of the things that is highly, highly prevalent for learning professionals, and most of you will relate to it, is to understand what age groups and what positions of seniority they come. Sometimes people can be senior enough, they can be not educated or not aware. They can be people who are junior, but well more educated and way more experienced. Because what positions they are at is what positions they were hired for. That's not necessarily rewarding or awarding the knowledge they bring. So when you begin your learning strategy, it's very important for you to do something called an audience analysis. Please make time for it. Even if it means you're doing multiple coffee table conversations, you're sending out a survey. In case your organization is survey fatigue, do not send out a survey. Do a random focus group. Do a coffee table. Do a break time conversation. or do a virtual handpicked group of people, do a Zoom, do a Microsoft Teams. Try to find out, number one, what kind of people you are going to interact with. Number two, what is the main objective of this training? कौन इसको drive कर रहा है? कौन क्या learning strategy का outcome है? Based on that, you can decide that this group requires XYZ people to be given more attention on, less attention on, and based on that, we will decide what kind of a learning strategy we need to implement. And when I say learning strategy, it is primarily leading into digital transformation. So we will talk about that. And what kind of an implementation strategy is required? किसको ज़्यादा help चाहिए होगी, किसको कम help चाहिए होगी? And do we need to separate out the people? Do we need to take it one step at a time? Do we need to go back to the blueprint again and again? This goes back to our six pillars that we spoke about. So that customization will come. Do not feel overwhelmed. We will talk in detail about the kind of customization we require. But at this point in time, I hope all of you will agree and acknowledge that customization is required for your learning strategy, your digital transformation strategy, your people strategy to succeed. Yeah. Of course, this goes without saying, varying communication styles with people in case you have multi-generational workforce, and then refining techniques for delivering feedback. A millennial can be given a feedback over a coffee, but a baby boomer or a Generation X person would prefer a documented, closed door, face-to-face, in-person feedback. Then there are people who would say कि मेरे को तो mail पे लिख के दे दो या मेरे को तो text कर दो. So depending upon what kind of generation and what kind of a person, both, like I said, we'll avoid stereotyping, what kind of a person we are dealing with and what kind of a generation they belong to and how they interact with others, because you have to be careful. You give a person a closed room feedback and the other person is given feedback on text, there can be a problem. So how do you refine the technique of giving somebody feedback? If you know somebody is sensitive, if you know somebody tends to get emotional, if you know somebody has gone through stress and you're giving them a not so great feedback, in that situation, you might refine the technology and make an exception and not do one size fits all. Okay. Then creating age diverse teams, because like I said, one generation, too much of one generation in a team can cause problems, and establish employee retention practices. As to that, that is largely the responsibility of the human resources team. But like I said, learning folks, the trainers often play a huge part in designing the culture for the organization, which means that your ability to show people that they add value and they will continue to add value and continue to contribute to the company's success plays a huge role in their retention in the organization. Often, human resources relies on the training department to make sure that their people feel engaged enough, important enough, valuable enough to continue engaging with the company. So it is looked at a learning is looked as a retention strategy as well. Okay. So we're going to talk about legacy HR and digital HR. We've referred to human resources for quite some time. We brought in some interesting conversations that you guys did, and I'm thank you for that. What I'm going to allow you guys do is take on this information which is on the screen. Okay, I'm going to shut up for 2 minutes and let you guys look at this, read this, absorb this before I go into details of it. This is not something new. This is not something that you haven't experienced. But it's important to understand how the difference between legacy HR, which is the traditional HR, and digital HR contributes to shaping culture and addressing mindset issues. Okay. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute or so and let you guys go through this content. I don't want to read the content out. All right. You guys okay? Have you guys gone through it? Yes, no, maybe you need more time to read through it. Let me know.
Yeah, ma'am, done.
Done? Great. So,
Done.
अलग से बताने की जरूरत नहीं है कि what legacy HR really means. Legacy HR is traditional way in which human resources used to operate. It was disconnected, siloed. We use these words now, and I was responding to Debay, and I think that's when I said that now we are coming closer and becoming business partners. If you really see, I do not know what HR model it is. I'm forgetting the name. It's Colbay's or somebody else's HR model where they talk about how business HR is coming closer to the overall HR function. HR is a business partner. That portion is becoming larger and larger and more significant because now, unless and until you are delivering and contributing to the end results that the business is trying to achieve, you are pretty much irrelevant. You can be replaced by a machine. So, disconnected HR to one HR. Perception driven, which is assumptions. Word of mouth. ये लड़की ठीक नहीं है यार, ये थोड़ी ना कुछ भी हवा में बात कर देती है. There's no proof to it. There are no data to it. There's no logic to it. It's a perception. And that becomes a part of your conversation. And what do you hide it under? In human resources, potential. Potential में जाके किसी को mark करती है. Just based on somebody's whims and fancies. That's going away. Most organizations are getting rid of the performance potential. Many organizations, including Accenture, have moved into a non-bell curve approach. They don't use the bell curve. They simply say, is project mein, this is your feedback, you are good, and you write your own KRAs, you are measured on it, and this project is over, the white slate is wiped clean, let's move on to the next project, new opportunity. What it does is, it allows people, number one, encourages people to make mistakes and learn from them. It is not that, oh my God, ye to ho gaya, ab to saal ke अंत के लग गई, तो कुछ नहीं होगा. That thought itself can demotivate somebody to even try, because you know that your end year feedback is not going to be great because of your one mistake. But what happens is, if you move away from perception, you go from project to project rating, project to project performance feedback, project to project inputs to your year end rating. What happens is, you are given the opportunity and you are also shown that we are a data driven organization, even when it comes to human traits. Okay. And it encourages people to think that I am learning from my mistakes and my organization is okay with it, as long as I'm not doing the same mistake all over again. Activity focused instead of business outcome focused. Activity focused, simple, letter issue करो, वो RNR कर दो, और वो team activity कर दो, और ये सब कर दो. That's it. Right? That's activity focused. Check mark. ये check mark कर दिया हमने, ये काम कर दिया. Instead of that, if it can't be measured, don't do it. Business outcome focus. So whatever activities are doing, is it creating a return on the investment? For example, if you do a team activity, do you see a change in the enthusiasm of people contributing to the business? Do you see a change in the mindset of the people? Do you see true cultural alignment? So if you were given as a human resource team the job for cultural immersion, that's what it's called, you go and you do certain activities, which basically means that you will have to translate the vision, the mission statement of the company into the minds of people. What kind of activities, what kind of games, what kind of interactions, what kind of coaching, what kind of mentoring, what kind of plan you're doing, so that you can call the same employee and ask or have a conversation, and you can hear the sound of the same vision statement and mission statement without people parroting it. Nowadays, what happens is, not nowadays, I mean, at least for the past few years, it used to happen, is you call somebody, आपको अपना vision statement पता है company का, so half of the people would say पता ही नहीं है क्या है, and बाकी जिनको पता है वो पढ़ के बता देंगे. And when you say, how do you relate to it, तुम्हें पता है how does it impact your job, वैसे पता नहीं. So how do you make it relatable? So that is where we are talking about human resources becoming business outcome focused. That means, if now earlier a person would say pata nahi kya hota hai, and now then after those activities, when you talk to somebody, they are able to relate to it and say, this is how I translate this part of the vision statement into my day-to-day job. Then you've done a good job. And how you measure it. Okay. Then it becomes, instead of just an HR process, ये अभी process में है, I need a letter, हाँ अभी process में है, अभी इसका signature नहीं हुआ, so वो नहीं हुआ. It's more of transactional, like I said, check mark. Instead of that, what is the experience you're delivering to people? How many follow-ups are they required to do? Are you hiding behind excuses or justifications or processes? Because of this typical process-centric approach, There are many, many automations that are actually contributing to positive employee experience. For example, earlier there used to be a need for requesting a bank letter for a loan or an address proof, etc. With all the automations that's happening, is you do not have to wait anymore. The software will generate a letter without you having to wait at all, following up with anybody, writing any email. You go into your system, you click a button, it gives you a standard letter with a company seal and signature. That is positive employee experience. That is what digital HR can contribute to you. Then organizational silos. We've spoken about it. Networked organization means that human resource doesn't sit separately. Most of the organizations can interact with them, give them inputs. So ऐसा नहीं होगा कि आपके पास human resource में dated previous information pada hua hai. You will get their latest targets, you get the employees' progress, you get the employees' learning records, you get everything that is required to be known for an employee instead of having to ask 15 people. And this is where I'm going to take the side of human resources and even trainers. We struggle to get information from the business because they are siloed and उनके पास standard response होता time नहीं है. आया बाद में बात करेंगे. I'll send you it later. And then you're waiting to be able to take an initiative or do anything because you don't have the information. But if you have an online system where everybody is mandated to put in the changes, mandated to put in the latest goals, mandated to update roles and responsibilities and everything else, you are no longer operating in a silo. You are operating truly as a network organization and you are updated of all the information at real time. You don't have to wait or waste time or embarrass yourself as a human resource team by sending out information or talking to somebody about outdated information. It is truly impactful, especially in organizations which are huge in size. Okay, there are traditional organizations which have really grown big. In case they do not adapt and embrace human resources, which is digital, it is almost impossible to keep track of changes that are happening. We are not talking about small organizations, 100 and 200. We are also talking about organizations which are huge. And being a networked organization is relevant for both small organizations as well as large organizations because the end impact that is experienced is by the employee. And who runs your job? Who runs the shop? The end employee. One bad experience can ensure that the person goes, becomes toxic, and takes 5 more people with them. So this becomes a very high priority at today's. Thankfully, nowadays people are recognizing it and people are moving away from legacy human resources to digital. In India, and here I'm taking a big swing, and do not quote me on this, but this is my personal opinion, the adaptation is becoming faster because of cost benefits. But even then, what it really entails or what it really means is still not clear. But in international organizations, the change has been faster with the outcomes being the focus, not just cost saving. Okay. Last one, low digital adoption, because legacy HR वो issue कर रहा है, वो छुट्टी पे है, वो आएगा तो होगा. Whatever changes is happening, इसका bonus letter नहीं मिला, इसका performance feedback, this person doesn't agree with it, इसका follow up conversation होना है. There is people dependency, manual dependency, Excel sheet dependency, macro dependency. When you have a digital human resources team, you are able to raise requests, you are able to respond to the employee with a chat, you are able to talk to people. There is less manual, less people dependent. So this is how the digital human resources changes can benefit an organization. There are some salient features that I'm showing you on the side. Automation elements the mundane, which means the typical manual thing. It allows efficiency. It allows HR to become data-driven. It enhances adaptability to the changing workforce. When I say changing workforce, that means a different kind of people who are being hired. There is a whole section in your textbook about this. You can read in detail. I have spoken through it. I've talked through it. And you can look at it. But then why are we talking about digital HR at this point in time? It will get clear when we go to the next slide. We are talking about disruptive needs and we are talking about workplace of the future. And for you to be able to implement your digital transformation agenda, it is important for you to get human resources on your side, for them to be the champions for you, to be able to show value to the organization. So those of you who brought up questions like the organization doesn't want to implement, it's too much cost, people think of it as an additional burden, that is where you can take the digital human resource examples and benefits and proof of concept to people to show what benefits the organization can get if they use digital transformation in learning and development as well. But to be able to build those cases and to be able to take the digital human resources folks and the implementation method with a relevant example, you need to know what the disruptive needs are in the future. Unless and until you know what you are building for, you cannot make a convincing case. So, what are the disruptive needs for the future? These are 6 digital competencies which people will eventually require in the future. Use technology as an enabler. Embrace disruption. It's a part of life. Ye hoga hi hoga. There's just one pandemic happened. I call it pandemic, but obviously that's a matter for further discussion. But then these disruptions will continue happening. In earlier times, the gaps between disruptions were later, but now it's going to be faster and easier, and for people to also recover from it because they've seen something as huge as COVID. Now, the people recovery from something like that will become not that difficult because people have already experienced something like that. So disruption will be a part of life. Embrace it. Leverage information technology. We are saying technology as an enabler, but you also have to leverage it. You use it as an enabler, but you have to leverage it on a regular day-to-day part of your life, not just one-off implementation or one-off enabler. In fact, there's something called change fatigue that I was reading in one of the HBR articles recently. People earlier would embrace change very easily because change wouldn't happen that often. Now there is so much change that happens in 1 year, people are getting fed up with the change. There is a change fatigue that they are experiencing. And what does change fatigue means? Before you get adjusted to the change, कुछ नया आ गया है. चाहे वो digital implementation है, चाहे policy change है, चाहे organizational goal change है. So how do you become excellent at iteration as a business leader? How do you become excellent at iteration as a learning person so that people are not confused and they are not saying that ये बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहा है, it's too much change. So how do you make sure that you become excellent in iteration? That's number 4. Number 5, use the crowd wisely. I'm going to leave this to interpretation and come back to you later. And number 6 is go beneath the surface. Now, the 5th and the 6th ones are my favorite ones. Who wants to take a jab at what number 5 means? Use the crowd wisely. What does it mean? Anyone?
May I try?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. When you're talking about changes, when you're talking about disruption, so we have another subject called as innovation. So that is also something with change management. So how do you use your employees? How do you use your workforce to drive this change, to drive the workforce of the future? So rather than, I believe, rather than being a top-down approach and being it like a authoritative thing that this has to be done, ye change hai, you either accept it or you don't. It's not like a choice. Let us like gain you can say, how do I say this? I don't know if I'm
Consensus.
not able to get the word. Yes, a
Consensus.
consensus. Thank you so much. Yes. Use a consensus because then the change would be much easier for them to accept, and they would also be like advertise it like as a word of mouth to those
Hmm,
persons who are not open to those
hmm,
changes.
hmm, hmm.
So that
So
is what my thoughts
thank
are.
you, Shruti. And thank you for sharing that because it's absolutely correct. Building onto it slightly, you spoke about top down, which is naturally how people lead in an organization where you don't really go beneath the surface. You look at the symptom, but you don't really look at the cause. These are number 5 and 6 we are talking about. So what do we do? The other thing is that going away from top down, what you do is you do bottom up. When you do bottom up, how many of you have seen not Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones? How many people are aware of Game of Thrones as a series?
Not
Thoda
same.
answers? Okay.
Watch some
So,
episode of it.
okay. So one of the things that I want to tell you guys is the whole this massive series was based on Mara Tokem's book. But then many sections of this book were crowdsourced. What does crowdsourcing mean? That means the audience writes the story. The audience writes the story. The audience tells you what should happen. इसके बाद क्या होना चाहिए. So you use the crowd wisely. So you suggest a change and then you see the reactions of what people say. Okay, we want to do this. What do you think, guys, we should do? This is where digital transformation will largely play a role. You throw एक idea throw करो, and then in this forums let people come up with ideas. You will be surprised कितना काम वो लोग खुद ही कर देंगे आपको कुछ करने की जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ेगी. And
So
the
very
best
nice
part is,
concept. Good.
हाँ, तो आपको ओनरशिप भी नहीं लेनी, आप ही ने बोला था. So next time you implement something, you simply say तुम लोगों ने suggest किया था. So what happens is it gives accountability. And that is where digital human resources, digital transformation helps, because it opens up these digital forums, discussion forums, discussion boards for people to come up with ideas as to this is a change we are looking to implement. What do you think the approach should be? So there are so many
Something like
people.
in coaching also we do na similar kind of a thing
Yes,
in coaching.
yes, yes.
Coaching
You
also
tell
we
them
ask the team members to come up with ideas and what could be the
exactly.
probable solutions. So how you go ahead with it.
Yes,
And the
yes.
ownership is also more because they've come up with the idea rather than we giving them the ideas what should be done.
Exactly, exactly. Because coaching is what? Telling you, enabling you, encouraging you to ask questions for yourself. आप जवाब नहीं देते कभी भी coaching में आप जवाब नहीं देते. You are supposed to find yourself, especially in life coaching. You never tell you what the solution is. In mentoring, in some situations, you give the answers because you're mentoring somebody for a job. But in coaching, you encourage people to ask questions and find solutions themselves. So that's a similar thing that is being done here. Going beneath the surface, not treating the symptom, but treating the cause. So that is another competency which will make the make or break for your digital transformation implementation. So these are 6 competencies. अगर ये 6 competencies हैं, so what are the disruptors? These 6 competencies are in response to these disruptors that you see on the right hand side. And what are those disruptors? Those disruptors is number 1, technology will be everywhere. 6 billion smartphones. Up to 2020 का number है. I had picked it up from different sources. ये तो काफी पुराना data. I'm sure this is advanced further. There is a tsunami of data. Most of us go to research. Earlier, when we would do research, we will find 5 articles, 10 articles, 50 articles, 100 articles. Now you find millions and millions and millions of articles and information. Half of it is not even true, but there's a tsunami of data. Change in nature of a career. Nobody has to speak more about it. We are all experiencing it. Diversity and generational change, how people interact. Okay. AI computing, cognitive computing, robotics, and all of that, which used to be a thing for मतलब कोई एक ऐसा fantasy था, and that is coming into our real life now. We are experiencing bots and we are experiencing robots everywhere, and by the look of the things, it's only going to get more and more and more ingrained into our lives. Explosion in contingent work, people moving out of countries, all kinds of mixed populations, mixed breeds, mixed diversity lines, people getting into marital relationships with all kinds of race, age, ethnicity, all kinds of mixed explosion of contingent work happening, and jobs vulnerable to automation. These percentages are again old. These are 2016 statistics, but if you look at it right now, I think they have drastically changed, and they are like figures would be, I would say, I would strongly disagree with 35% in UK. It would be like 75% in UK right now, 80% in US, and I think 100% in China. But but then these are just my numbers. I'm just making a joke here. But the idea is that these are the disruptors that are driving these 6 digital competencies. And these digital competencies have been proposed based on these disruptions. Because of these disruptions will happen, these are the competencies we need to, as learning professionals, develop in the people. तो ये तो हमने समझ लिया कि क्या रिस्क है, हम एक्साइटेड हो गए, एंड वी स्टार्टेड इम्प्लीमेंटिंग ऑल ऑफ दिस. व्हाट आर द रिस्क्स? द फर्स्ट रिस्क इज पीपल. क्यों? People are generally not willing to go into change. They are not ready to embrace change easily. They will resist it. They will have their own logic. Then there is lack of research. वो कर रहा है इसलिए मैं भी कर रही हूँ. नहीं, तुम देखो तुम्हारे लिए क्या relevant है. Research or organization. Not all solutions are required, and not all solutions will help you. Some solutions will have to be customized for your own need. इसलिए blindly adaptation मत करो. Follow the 6 pillars. Make sure that you look at the relevance for your organization, even if you're running your own business. Poor communication and lack of alignment. Like I gave example, people are confused. क्यों हो रहा है ये? ये चल तो रहा था ठीक. Why is it happening? Not enough communication, not enough conversation, lack of alignment. कुछ भी हुआ वही जो मैंने पहले क्लास में बोला था, गर्म पानी डाल दिया तुम्हारे ऊपर, चेंज हो गया, ये लो चेंज. ऐसे नहीं होता. Are you investing in proper communication, aligning with people, telling them what benefit this digital transformation will bring for you? What's in it for you? विफम clear है कि नहीं? Then there is lack of measurement. Change तो कर दिया, पता ही नहीं चला क्यों किया, क्या हो गया, वैसे ही चल रहा है सब कुछ. How do you show, talk and communicate? Show, talk and communicate. When I say talk, it is more about giving examples to people. And communicate means formal communication of how the benefits have started showing with the digital transformation. Other than that, people will say, कुछ तो किया था, कुछ पता ही नहीं क्या हुआ. And doing too much too soon. This goes to my other point about poor communication alignment. It goes to my point about lack of research. Because you are doing too much too soon, there are chances of failures. We'll talk about some failures. There were some failures that happened in GE Electric, and there are multiple others which I will share with you. These are the risks of digital transformation. So how do you fix these risks? There are various kind of models that we can follow to mitigate risks. One of them is called the ADKAR model. Basically, it talks about transformation करने से पहले transformation के education दो. That doesn't mean that you start teaching people in case you are implementing an advanced portal or you're implementing an automation system. What will happen inside the system? No, don't teach them that. Teach them how to use the system. Teach them how to embrace the system. Teach them how to embrace the change that will happen after the system gets puts in place, is implemented full term, half term, initial, make the pilot clear, make the initial implementation clear, make the full term benefits very clear. So how does that work? It is about awareness. It is about desire to support the change, because when you create awareness, then you basically make it juicy, make it attractive for people to desire the change. Then give them the knowledge as to what will happen once the change happens, making the VIFM very clear. Then you coach them, mentor them, show them, train them to have the ability to use that to their benefit, so that all the excitement that you have created through the awareness and desire and providing the knowledge, they know how to implement it. And then comes reinforcement. Otherwise, क्या होगा? वो सीखेंगे, use नहीं करेंगे. They will slide back to their older habits. And to avoid that, you have to keep reinforcing. Prepare resistance to transformation. This is when, especially in the previous slide, we spoke about people. How do you prepare for resistance? There is a model called the Morer's 3 level of resistance. Be prepared for each stage. Stage number 1 is, I don't get it. क्या है ये? नहीं समझ आ. Stage 2 is, नहीं आया, मजा नहीं आया. So you first you say, I don't get it. And then people say, अच्छा तुम समझा दिया ना, हो गया ना, मुझे नहीं आया, नहीं मजा आया. And the third is, I don't like you. तुम्हारे वजह से हो रहा है सब कुछ. These kind of resistances, I'm sure all of you is either smiling or nodding your head, because this is what happens. Anybody who proposes the change, first people will resist the change, saying nahi samajh aa raha. Then after you spend your time and energy in creating awareness, creating the desire, giving them the knowledge, they don't want to earn the ability. So they say, nahi, we don't like it. And this is where budget gets slashed, people shut you down, they tell you to go home and do whatever you were doing earlier. And level 3 is like, I don't like you. तुम गलत. Change to देखा जाएगा जो होगा, तुम नहीं कर पा रहे. It becomes a question on you. And this is the typical place where a learning professional feels so demotivated, they want to quit and move. Right? So how do you make sure that you don't fall into the trap of this? Or even if you are prepared well ahead in time. Point number 4 will help you with this. I'm sorry, point number 3 is pretty much explanatory to everybody. Maintaining momentum by celebrating short-term wins. That means that when you do the small things of implementation, you keep celebrating it through communication, etc. But the change resistance that you're experiencing, point number 2 on the bottom left, you would see how you can handle it using the unfreeze, change, refreeze model. So how do you use it? I'm sorry, the spelling of change is wrong here. Unfreeze, change, and refreeze. So basically, when you say experience the I don't get it, you go ahead and you unfreeze that through recognize the need to change. So explain people why the change is, first of all, the change is required. Why is it required? How the older system is not serving you and what benefits the new system will get you. And ensuring there is strong support. This I spoke about in our pillars, that you find your champions who will support your change. And then understand the doubts and concerns. That is pillar number 1 and 2, experience and people, getting their experiences, getting their apprehensions. Jobs to nahi chali jayengi, मेरा number of hours तो नहीं बढ़ जाएगा, additional काम तो नहीं हो जाएगा, company का headquarter move तो नहीं हो जाएगा. All of these apprehensions which come up, some of them are totally unfounded. That is called unfreezing. When you open up the door, you unfreeze it. Then you implement the change. Do it in a phased manner. And the last is refreeze. Refreeze is something, the same R which is in the ADKAR model, reinforcement. Making sure people do not slide back into old habits. They do not go complaining that kuch hua hi nahi, kuch fayda hi nahi hua. So changes have to be reinforced and stabilized. So when people will come up with concerns, even after you spend enough time in unfreezing, they will still come up with challenges. They will still come up with apprehensions. How well you are reinforcing the change and how well you are explaining and integrating changes in daily life. How are you making sure that, nay, this is the older way of doing things. This is how we will do this. So every aspect of your life, you are bringing in the change. And that is when you also get to success celebration phase. That means that every phase that you implement, you go into refreeze. You go into change, you go into refreeze. You go into change, you go into refreeze. You keep doing it over a period of time till the time it becomes the normal way of life. And that is why typically a success factor implementation or a cultural implementation, a typical time period is taken as 3 years. At least in the past, it used to. Nowadays, they've crunched it shorter because people are more adaptable to change. But earlier, there would be change management that would happen 3 years before they would phase out systems, phase out servers, phase out softwares. All of that requires time to refreeze. It's not about the unfreeze and the change. It's easy. Unfreeze is easy. One day you send an email, do some town halls, talk about change. But when the stage of refreeze comes, if it's not done successfully, it will not be a change that will be sustained. It will most of the time be a stopgap arrangement and people will slide back to older ways of thinking. So these are the ways in which you can mitigate your risks. Okay, there are strategies and implementations, etc., that we'll talk about the next chapter. But right now, you need to know how you can mitigate the various risks. Now, there are 3 case studies that I'm going to give you: Netflix, Adobe, and Fujifilm. They will come to you as a separate PDF document that I will send to you. Read these up for fun. You will get to know how the digital transformation in tech and entertainment industry happened, in the software industry happened, and the digital imagery industry happened. Okay. And there are some additional readings I'm giving you. Again, these are light readings. McKinsey's 21 Keys to Success in Digital Transformation, Unlocking Success, examples of companies that have mastered digital innovation, and companies that did it right. Again, light readings. I remember in the first session, somebody actually asked for some case studies. So this is where it is. I'm going to send it over along with this presentation. I'm going to take a breath now and I'm going to stop sharing the screen and ask you guys. It's been a long monologue. Questions, doubts, anything else that you want to clarify? Oh, wow, I'm 10 minutes over. I'm sorry, guys. Let me stop recording.